All right, what's going on, everyone? Welcome to another episode of Conspiracy or Just a Coincidence. I'm Jack Allen. So today I have the conspiracy mentor, the librarian himself, the odd man out. Odd man, welcome and thank you for coming on.
Oh, you're too kind, my man. Always a pleasure to be on with you. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. First, so I put out like our topics and we were just talking about skull and bones, but did you see that Dan Crenshaw clip of him yelling at a little girl, like in questioning?
No, no.
It was a few. I'll send you the clip later, and if people just search Crenshaw on Twitter and you'll find it. But basically, he was at like a town hall. It looked like he was in like maybe a restaurant, and a young girl, like 12, like a minor, like 12, a teenager girl, read back a quote that he said, and his quote was, and I'm gonna butcher it, but but he said his quote was like, people like the hero archetype. People like he says characters like Jesus, Superman, Rosa Parks. And so like he's calling Jesus here a fiction, a
Mhm.
character, which,
Right.
Mr. Christian conservative. And so the girl reads him back and he interrupts her and he says, I'm going to help you there. Make a period after Jesus and don't question my faith. And he was going for like a big, like, oh, like everyone clapping in the audience. But instead, here, tons of groans because the kid's a little girl. But I just found that like he's such a slime ball.
Yeah, he really oozes this just disgusting bureaucrat, spook kind of vibe, doesn't he?
Yeah, dude, and I think I sent to you his dad, grew up in South America. Who grows up and he's what, probably like mid 40s, early 50s, grew
Mhm.
up in South America. His dad, I found him on LinkedIn. He works for in the petroleum industry, of course. So I'm sure in South America he was just, you know, scouting oil spots. I'm sure, but like and he's a what? He's in a young CFR or whatever that group's called.
Oh, I'm not sure.
Well, like him and Tulsi Gabbard. It's like the CFR, but I think it's like young CFR
Oh,
members.
okay.
But I just like wanted to say that story because I just hate so many people, and Crenshaw's on that list.
Speaking of Tulsi, um, she of course is more likable because I mean she's kind of an attractive woman for a
Right.
politician. Obviously,
Right. Yeah.
she's pretty hot, but like for an old dude like my age or whatever.
I got no.
You
She's
know,
an attractive woman. Yeah, absolutely. Right.
but she you kind of want to like her because she was a veteran and she seems kind of tough and stuff like that. And she said some things that that I kind of like, but she's a Democrat and she was in the Council on Foreign Relations. I assume still is, and she's only saying a few things, and it's like to me, I kind of feel like she could be one of those kind of plants as well. You know what I mean? Like, just I feel like there's so many out there now that are kind of telling the people what they want to hear and kind of trying to like I feel kind of like the conservative side because it's kind of in limbo right now because of the whole Trump thing.
Mm.
Um, I don't know if that's the right term or not, but it's kind of like hanging on out there. There's no real heroes in the conservative movement right now besides Trump, and some people are still hanging on to that. But like now, I feel like they're trying to reconstruct the whole conservative thing, and so Rogan and Elon and some of these people are getting pushed. And those guys are not conservative whatsoever. I mean, Joe admits that he was socialist, or he's got
Right.
socialist leanings, and he was going to vote for Bernie Sanders and all that stuff. But I feel like that's the new right. I really do. I feel like they're kind of pushing that to become the new heroes of the conservative movement.
You're right. Like so many people are now becoming heroes of like Rogan, like you said, and he had that doctor as we Malone on who, and our friend John, he did an extensive work, and I didn't watch it, but I anyone that they push into this like right hand, you immediately question, and like you said, he's I don't know what like it's just so confusing. Everything is
Mhm.
just these like you said, Joe Rogan, he was universal health care and things that I don't like disagree with, but why he becomes these like that people become idolized so easily in this. I think people are just searching for somebody that can like be strong for them, that
Mhm.
shares their beliefs. I don't know what it is, but you're right though. Like all these guys are becoming new like icons of the right.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because, like, before it was always some, some milk toast conservative guy like Ted Cruz or something, and they would push him and people would get behind him. A lot of people were behind Ted Cruz before Trump,
Yeah.
and I kind of thought he was a decent guy up until the point I realized his wife had helped write the CFR back in the like 98 had this plan to kind of merge United States, Canada, and Mexico, and they call it the North Atlantic Community, I think, or something like that.
Okay.
And so she helped write the playbook for the CFR to do that.
No
And
way.
I was like, why in the world would if that's his wife,
What's
and
her
she,
what's her
um,
background? Like she's not a lawyer or
I think she may be a lawyer too. I think he was a lawyer, correct?
right. Yeah.
Yeah, I think she was a lawyer too. I'm pretty sure. It's been a while since I looked into it.
Yeah. I didn't know she wrote the so she wrote like what like the plan or what how it would work?
Yeah, I think it actually is called the North. I think it's called the North American Community. I could be wrong about that, but you could find it on. I think you can actually buy it because a lot of those CFR books you can buy
Yeah.
on Amazon. And I almost got it once. But I'm like, this is probably going to bore me to death. But I'd like
Uh
to have it just to show her name, Heidi Cruz, on there.
oh, Heidi Cruz. She's a managing director at Goldman Sachs since 2012.
Of course she is.
No, she's a wonderful woman. Man, how dare you call out this conservative Christian's wife?
That is so funny. Wonder why you don't hear more about that. You think the left would eat that up, like tear it up, but unfortunately, a
Uh,
lot of their guys are also connected to Goldman Sachs, so maybe they don't want to call too much attention
oh well,
to it.
that's it, dude. That like they can never call out this blatant, because they're all a part of this. Mitch McConnell's wife, she's tied to China somehow. They're all, that's just so funny. A managing director of Goldman Sachs. But I think that this is even
Wow.
like a perfect segue. So you're working on a new Skull and Bones book, and I have done one that you recommended, I'm pretty sure, from Daniel Uslan. But the big thing that like I took away from Skull and Bones was that at least Daniel Uslan's book was that like they base a lot of this ideology off of Hegel, this German philosopher who you cause you just control both sides of the extremes, you crash them, and you can push the solution to where you want to go. And that's exactly
Yeah.
what we see today.
Yeah. Isn't that crazy? It's like once you understand that whole technique, you realize that is going on constantly and has been all throughout recorded history, basically.
Mhm.
You have the people in charge. They want a certain outcome, but they can't just take it without killing a lot of innocent people. And they don't want to have that on that kind of bad publicity.
Right.
uh, so they figure out another way. So they foment a an emergency, or they take an existing issue and make it much much worse. So people will react in a certain way, and then they can come in and say, "Oh, we've got the plan to save you," and then that plan is what they wanted to do all along. So it's so
Right.
simple, really. But if
It's just oh no, continue.
no, I'm just gonna. It's just so simple, but like the average person, if they've never thought about that and never heard of the Hegelian dialectic, they um, they don't think about it. They don't understand it. They
No.
just believe whatever is in the news.
Right. Well, I mean, they were again like one guy wrote a comment the one time because I wrote these people are brilliant but evil, and he was like nothing's brilliant. But the skull, I mean, those for anyone like just that just woke up and doesn't know what skull and bone. It's started in Germany in like the 1800s. I think it was kind of like an offshoot of the Illuminati, right?
That's kind of what Anthony C. Sutton in this book I'm reading too, this Chris Milligan, they think it spawned from the Order of the Illuminati because it came out of, I think it was William Huntington Russell was studying over in Germany, and he and Alfonso Taft, the father of President Taft, are the ones that started it here in the United States.
Right. 1832. And that was when they imported from Germany. And also, which is crazy, is Taft and Russell's family both got rich off of the opium trade in China.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
They were huge in that.
Yes. That's one of the most, the wildest things is when you start to look at how so many of these guys got rich, and so many of them were like the heads of different, well, like the Carnegie Institution. The first president was a Skull and Bonesman. This guy Daniel Coit Gilman.
Mm, yeah.
He was also, I think he was the first president of the Ford Foundation too. Uh,
He was also president of Johns Hopkins.
and Johns Hopkins, and he
Right.
really didn't have any training or background that would really help him to be in that position. But he was he had the hookup. So
Right. Well, that was what they were so smart with too. They like this Gilman guy, even Woodrow Wilson's teacher at Wisconsin University, who that was like his mentor, was Skull and Bones. Like they spread their wings out and they become the industry standard. Because right around this time of Skull and Bones, in like 20 years, you have the beginning of the maybe longer than 20 years, but Rockefeller Foundation and all these groups trying to capitalize the medical system and
mhm.
creating these schools. And they would just put they created Skull and Bones members created, or I think, and with Rockefeller Foundation, the American Psychiatrist Association, the American Medical Association, the American Historical Association. I mean, they got everything. They got it all covered.
Yeah, and when you are able to control all of those things, you control the history books, you control, I mean, this everything, and you are the one that decides what is what and how things are thought about, and if that makes sense, it's just so much power for one group to have.
Right. I mean, look what we see today. This is like the culmination of this, the experts and the gold standard or whatever they refer to it as. I mean, they set this up 100 years ago or 200 years ago
Yeah,
by setting that if you have the leader of the group, the president is your Skull and Bones group, you all hang out outside of this, the American Historical Association. So you guys have a general idea of how you feel. When you're about to die, who do you pick as president? Do you pick a guy that you dislike, that didn't agree with anything you said, or do you pick the guy who's goes along with everything you asked him to?
exactly. They control. It's like Anthony C. Sutton said. That they control the history books. They own a lot of the public book publishers, and they hire the historians to write the history that they want them to write. I think I was reading. I think it was in the book that I was talking about earlier. That I think it was in like the 1947. The Rockefellers, they um, they paid like I think it was like 200,000 at the time to have the history of World War II written. And
Wow.
and I know there were at least two Rockefellers that were members of the Skull and Bones, Percy Rockefeller, and I forget the other one. But
Yeah.
you got names like Russell, Taft, Harriman of the railroad fortune, Whitney, Lord, of course, the Bushes and Carys,
Hmm.
Forbes, which John Kerry is John Forbes Carey,
I
so
didn't
he's
know that.
yeah,
Ah,
that guy has got it
interesting.
on both sides. He's just he
Wow.
really comes for money. Harriman, if I didn't mention that, oh, I did mention that. Pillsbury, Stimson, and
I didn't know.
Perkins.
Is Pillsbury the dough? The dope?
Yeah,
No
yeah,
way,
right.
really? He was a
Hmm.
Skull and Bones? That
Yeah,
family is? Damn.
yeah. I've been trying to look because it doesn't have some of the more modern members
Yeah.
in that book I was reading, but just a couple people that I realized. Steve Mnuchin was Trump's Treasury Secretary. He was Skull and Bones.
Isn't he a Goldman Sachs guy too?
I think, yeah, he was definitely, definitely. Let's see here. Dana Milbank used to be like a big Washington Post reporter. I don't know if still around or not, but Skull and Bones
Just
there.
anyone like, I also remember reading how the Rockefellers were looked down upon when they went to Yale and they joined the Skull and Bones because those original, like the Whitneys and the Lords. I mean, these people were in America since the 1600s and they
Mhm.
dominated. It was all these, WASP. Rockefellers were Baptist. WASP, for anyone listening, is Western Anglo-Saxon Protestant. But and they thought they mocked the Rockefellers in the way they talked, which is such a crazy concept to even think that this family name that is associated with power and destruction was laughed at and viewed as like lower class compared to these other families.
Isn't that crazy? Yeah, because they were relatively new money, and these other guys had been, they had been at it for quite a while.
Yeah.
As it's hard for us to fathom that, but yeah, that is crazy.
It's interesting. I think about like those because I remember I read this book so like, oh wow, almost over a year ago. And I didn't, I was kind of relatively new to reading and I was thinking a lot like Whitney and Lord and stuff. I couldn't really connect any like common time these names anymore. Do you think they're still around like these kind of or do you think they just have trust set up and they've kind of played their role, change of times?
It's a good question. I think that the Whitneys are still around. I don't know about the Lords. And some of these, because I learned from looking into the Pilgrim Societies, a lot of times when the families don't have sons, they pass it on to the son-in-laws, and so the names
Hmm.
change. And so I wonder if something like that has happened.
Interesting. I was just wondering, and I didn't ever take to look it up, and I'm sure someone knows. But I also loved how the Skull and Bones they got all. It's just so weird, like Germany's involvement or Prussia's involvement in these secret societies, because obviously we know the Illuminati came from Bavaria, Skull and Bones is from Germany, and they what they loved so much was the Prussian military system, that idea of total war, which was kind of when they came up with it, that was new, like this with all these weapons. Like I guess wars were fought probably more guerrilla tactic until Prussia, their military strategy, and then also was their education system that they loved this teaching of brainwashing essentially, and that's what they wanted to bring to America. I guess like not brainwash, a control mechanism that you could form your next generation through the school system, which what they were doing in Prussia.
Yeah, it is amazing. It's amazing who all has come out of Germany, and
Right.
it's mind blowing when you start to look at it. I think the Order of the Golden Dawn was
Yeah.
formed in Germany.
Yeah.
Vril Society. What's the other one?
The Thule Society.
Thule Society. There's probably a couple more, but I just can't think of them. Oh, the
Yeah.
Rosicrucians. I think they were formed in Germany, if I'm not mistaken.
Wow.
So that is pretty amazing. Um, yeah, and like somebody said to me the other day, because I was telling a friend that I was looking into them, and he's not really into conspiracies, but he's like, they're just like a fraternity, right? And
Yes, just like a fraternity.
and I was like, well, they're a fraternity, but they actually are a little bit different because they are a senior year only fraternity. And at least in the 80s, when Anthony C. Sutton wrote the book about the Skull and Bones, he said that at the time, the Skull and Bones and only two other fraternities were senior year only fraternities, and that was Wolf's Head and Scroll and Key, and those are both at Yale as well.
Mhm.
And so his idea was that they do it, that they're senior year fraternities because they're getting them ready to go out and be into high finance and into heads of industry and then in prominent positions of power in government. So I thought that was
Yeah,
kind of interesting. And also, they in 1856, the Skull and Bones was incorporated as the Russell Trust, which makes them different. So the Russell Trust is still earning money, and they bought, they have their own kind of little getaway on, I think it's Deer Island on the St. Louis River. It's like a resort for the patriarchs of the society only. So I thought that was kind of
interesting.
interesting.
Kind of an Epstein Island type of feeling.
Yeah, yeah. I wonder what goes on there. I'd like to be a fly on the wall.
Big keggers, that's what goes on. Huge beer
Oh,
pong tournaments.
yes.
And
There's
I
probably
also
some cross dressing too, because it seems to
I'm sure
always go along with it.
they love to do that as well. So I don't know why, but that's into the there's two well what so I read that World War One book and I was like I'm not a proclaimed monarchist, but my ideal anyway, the World War I was started to destroy the monarchies. Well, I found out also that the German Kaiser, Wilhelm Kaiser, is he the second maybe in World War One? But it's just going off this cross-dressing thing. He was having like a gathering at his mansion or castle, whatever you want to call it. And the next day, someone turns up dead on his castle grounds, and it's a man wearing a dress, and the media like covers it up or I mean, there's only newspapers at that time, but what is going on? What is going on? Right? Like I just don't under and like it was and we know like Weimar Germany was just complete degeneracy everywhere. But like there is something to this with this, and that's why like anybody who's in conspiracies and is not is like blinding themselves to clearly something is going on with this push of cross-dressing and being, what's the word? Part male, there's something there that it's just I don't know. I just had to bring that up. I was my guy who I thought I liked a lot, Kaiser Wilhelm, also is hanging out with people wearing dresses. Just it was really disturbing and disappointing for me.
It is weird because in so many of these societies, you see those kind of, that kind of symbolism, and it's like, what's going on here? And another thing I've noticed too, not with Skull and Bones, I haven't found out anything about it yet, but like the connection to Shakespeare, there's some kind of strange Shakespeare connection, and maybe it has something to do with, um, oh my gosh, what's his name? They think the guy that really wrote Shakespeare, Francis
Francis
Bacon.
Bacon, yeah.
Yeah, he's kind of a patriarch of Freemasonry, so like that may have something to do with it. But I know like the jesters, were huge into Shakespeare as well as the Shriners, the Knights of
Interesting.
Axar Ben, those guys that were connected to the Franklin scandal. Those guys were all into Shakespeare. I think, if I'm not mistaken, even Bohemian Grove, their Grove plays, they always have a different play every year, and it's really detailed. I think that they're based on Shakespeare.
Huh. I wonder who's
So,
acting in those shows.
yeah, really. I wonder if it's like the actual politicians
Is like
and
Warren
businessmen.
Buffett getting in and whoever else goes to Ronald Reagan wearing reliving his acting days, dressing up in an outfit. I don't know.
Right. I'd love to know, man.
And it's also so crazy. Is like we always say these secret societies, like there's so many things that are said in the conspiracy world, like all these secret societies go back to the mystery schools. And whether that's like true or not, that's how that Skull and Bones logo came was the Templars, right? Like his wife was killed, the Templar's wife, and they kept the femur and the skull, right? Isn't that how they got the Skull and Bones?
I've heard different stories. That one, I don't know if I've heard that one or not, but
So basically,
um,
like that's so the Templars, they get kicked out, they become pirates, and around that time, this one guy's like wife who he loved was slaughtered by, the evil monarchy, and so he buries or the Holy Roman Empire, and so he goes to her grave, he takes her skull and her two femur bones, and that's why you have skull and bones on pirate ships, according to this one book, and then I want your take
okay.
is because that's him. Like he made this flag. He was a Templar to represent his wife who was killed. And that's why Skull and Bones uses the Skull and Bones is because of that.
Wow, that's really interesting. Well, that probably is true then. I've heard a few different things, but I've not really read anything in particular in these Skull and Bones books yet. Um, but I did read because I've seen the Skull and Bones symbolism with Freemasonry, and I was reading up on that earlier, and like it's in. I think if you're a Master Mason, it's in the final initiation ritual, and it's in like the Knights of Kadash and one of the other ones in the York Rite and Scottish Rite. And the article I read was a Freemason site, but it claimed that the skull and bones really just represented your mortality, and it was a way to remind you that you die at any moment, so you needed to live right and be a good person and blah blah blah. And I thought that's just too cookie cutter for me. I
Right.
don't believe that.
Yeah, that's what they care about. You know,
Yeah,
they're well, and also I don't and I was wrong. I kept saying Daniel Houston because that's what I wrote on my notes, but it was Sutton's book. But he wrote about how in like I think 1873 a bunch because I can't imagine what college must have been like in 1873. Like it must have been nuts, dude. All these dudes, like, what do they do? They are dressed in like their three-piece suits, like partying because they're still kids. But regardless, the regular or general population at Yale, they were like annoyed with Skull and Bones because they ran the school paper eventually. They ran everything and they dominated it all. So a bunch of them, they had a little house on campus, which I'm sure they still do, like a fraternity house. And they broke into the Skull and Bones house and they, looked at everything and they wrote like a little book about all the stuff they found, how they found like skulls and all these like the books with all the members. I forget what else they found, but they posted it everywhere. Like the Facebook of their. I just find like look what I like not a phone any then, but I just thought that was, and then they rebuilt they made it impenetrable because they climbed through like the roof or something. But I just found that funny.
that is funny. Yeah, that's a wild looking building too. Don't they do they call it the temple or do they call it
Of
something
course
else?
they do. I'm sure they do.
Or
I'm
the
sure they.
crypt, maybe it's the crypt. I don't know. It's a pretty wicked looking building.
That sounds
Um,
more. I think they do call it the crypt.
Another thing I noticed that was maybe it may not mean anything, but I think it was Sutton who pointed out that they're actually called knights, or the senior members are called knights of the Order of Skull and Bones. And so, you see that knights kind of obviously going back to the Templars, but then the Knights of Malta, and I think I mentioned a few minutes ago, Scottish Rite has at least one of their levels is called the Knight of Kadash. They may have two or three different knights in their degrees, but like you've got all these different. The what's the Order of Saint John? That might be the same as Knights of Malta. I get those mixed up, but I
No,
know
I don't.
there's
No, it's not. Yeah,
okay, okay. I know there's several of those knights organizations that are shady,
yeah.
and
Well,
so
Dulles was a Malta. Um, William Casey was a Malta.
mhm.
Even one of the head of the mob was also a Knight of Malta. So they are in good
Oh wow.
company, and they deserve that. That's because the Catholic Church, for anyone listening, gives the Pope can give you this Knight of Malta recognition, sovereign. I forget what the full thing is, but basically it's like the highest degree you can get from the church. Even and he gave it to non-Catholics as well, non-Christians, atheists. But it's like you defend. I think it stems from like the Templars, obviously, but I don't know how we got in the Knights Malta. But yeah,
Yeah, yeah, that's kind of interesting too. I've never delved into them deeply. I'd like to, but if I'm not mistaken, I think I read that they actually their little I think it's an island, right? Malta. I think it's like their own little sovereign area, if I'm not
interesting.
mistaken. It's kind of like the Vatican.
Yeah. Also, I wanted to bring in this Hegel from that Skull and Bones, like got derived all their like beliefs kind of from, or how they were going to do things. I mean, this guy like Karl Marx was also into Hegel. Like all these guys that seemingly are on these, just like how we were talking about, opposite ends of the spectrum. They all realize at least the the power in using this philosophical belief of dividing people and forcing them to go on a side.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like again, I'll reference. I think it was Anthony C. Sutton. He talks about how regardless of left or right, that's just basically something that these elites use to kind of, kind of pit people against one another and get things done. But um, he said, if you really pay attention, it's always about the state. And, like no matter, even if it's on the right, it's what can they do for you? What can the state do for you? Even though they kind of, at least in the past, we kind of tried to act like, well, we don't want the state in our business, but it's always, those same guys were always getting us into wars and things like that, which is huge for the
Right.
state. So, You know, it's kind of you can kind of see what they're saying because, like, if the Democrats are doing something that the Republicans don't like, then the Republican politicians are going to say, "Let me save you from them by doing A, B, and C, or A, B, C, D, or whatever." You know, so it is
Well,
really all about what they can do for us. They don't want us to be independent. You know.
no, and I'm gonna bring up that question I about Hitler, but these Skull and Bones and these people like this, they funded Hitler's rise to power, though not as clear and open as they did with the Soviet Union. Harriman, who Oddman just talked, was a railroad magnate. He funded Soviet Russia, and then he was also like the ambassador or attaché, and would come back to America and say they're building up they're building up their defenses that he was giving them. But all these actions, it's just that problem react. They need to create these problems. And so it makes me wonder, like I asked Oddman this question. And if you guys have a good answer, send it to me. But I still struggle with like just the sense of building up these groups when they cause danger. Is it because they know they won't lose? Is it because they control that guy as well? And I'm referencing like Hitler, like in this scenario. It's just so, I just, it's hard for me to understand that these people have that much power. And I guess they do, to be able to control all sides of these groups and have everyone work as a perfect like cog in the machine to bring about the conclusion that they want.
Mhm.
I
Yeah,
don't know. Yeah.
absolutely, man. It's amazing because if you look at like World War I, you look at like German reparations was a huge deal. They were trying to make Germany pay this ridiculous amount of money to all these countries. Like this, there was no way that they could ever pay it. It was just on its face. It was like that could never happen. So they created the Bank for International Settlements to oversee it supposedly, and then that bank ended up becoming the bank over all the central banks. And it's untouchable, untouchable because of the treaty. It was created under a treaty, so no country, not even the local police, can go in and do anything to the Bank for International Settlements.
Well, and all, oh, go ahead. Sorry.
No, no, no. I was just going to say. Then after World War II, they were able to create the IMF and the World Bank, and so they can. And for the same reasons, basically. Well, these countries need help because they've been destroyed by war. So, but then once these bankers loan these countries money, a lot of times the countries cannot repay them anyway. They basically own the countries, and I think they start putting their guys in to run the countries. And at this point, I think that they probably have their guys in all kinds of
Right.
places of power all over the world.
Well, the Bank of International Settlements, like you said, that was total insanity because I read like you could, they would have, they were in Switzerland, right?
Hmm.
And
Yeah,
no one could go, not even janitors, nobody. They would black out. So you couldn't have any idea what was going on there. And then that ended up being the bank that was funding a lot of the Nazis
yeah,
building up their armaments.
yeah. They were loaning like they were holding Germany's gold that they had looted from other countries. They didn't put it in the Bank for International Settlements. They put it in another bank, but it was basically controlled by the Bank for International Settlements. But it's funny, at the same time, the Bank of England was working hand in hand with the Bank for International Settlements,
Right.
knowing that they were working with the Nazis. So, it's like, come on, what's going on here? And then they had Americans working at the Bank for International Settlements and people from other countries. It's just like it was all a big shit show because I think they just didn't want any like they didn't want to decrease in the money coming in and the interest
Yeah.
that they were making off the money. So they're like, well, we'll just keep letting this happen.
Right. Well, yeah. So that's like, is it greed or is there something? Because that's what they love, that rebuilding Germany, because they were giving them loans just like they do to us, and they were putting them in perpetual debt that they made, like Harriman and Prescott Bush. That's how he, as you know, but the Skull and Bones family, they helped fund his rise to power. And at the same time, his grandfather was being charged with crimes against the Enemy Act for making the munitions for 70% of World War I on both sides, giving it to Germany. And there's just, these people have no set like they're so evil and just I can't. It's almost unfathomable to like regular
Yeah.
people like you and I.
Yeah, it's hard to imagine. And then, like, I know we've talked about this several times, but if you're evil enough, you get like like Dulles, you get an airport named after you, or a highway, or a bridge, or
Yeah.
some beautiful building or something. But like, yeah, like, so Prescott Bush was working with Averell Harriman, and they had this thing called the Union Bank, if I'm not mistaken. I think that's what it was called. And so they were loaning money to Hitler, and it kept going on, and then they finally got found out about, that the people in the government knew what they were doing, people here. And I was reading in something the other day, and it said that when that bank was broken up, eh, under like some kind of treaty where you couldn't do business with the enemy,
Mhm.
there was only one newspaper article about it at the time, and it was the New York Times, and it just said a bank was broken up today, and it had the name of the bank, and it did not say that they were funding the Nazis.
Of course. That
So
isn't
it's
that
like,
so hilarious? So they just brought like another news, a bank was broken up, had nothing to do with the event going on in Germany at this time.
and instead of going to prison, Prescott Bush ended up being the senator for Connecticut, because I think the incoming, or the senator there died. Something happened to him,
Yeah, it
and
was
he ended up,
something weird.
yeah. So he got to live this awesome life, and of course his son and grandson got to be president. It's insane, dude.
Well, and
Everything's
these
ass backwards.
it's and these families like it all connects to Skull and Bones because in America at least because all these guys are American, but the Bushes, the Tafts, and that was Roosevelt's family. Like it's literally like these maybe like 20 families that a lot of times have been in Skull and Bones. I don't know if as much anymore, but they probably found other avenues to exploit. But they led American politics and wall forever, and they systematic like FDR. I taught how he was all this great progressive, earth shattering thing. He was in bed with he was in Germany after World War One. I don't know if he didn't go to Germany, but he started this company. I think it was AIG or AIC. I don't know, I get the acronym, but regardless, what they were doing is what they were buying. Germany was insolvent. People were lost everything. They helped switch it from the gold standard to silver standard, which further crashed their economy. So people were giving away, selling their homes just to eat. And FDR started this company where they came in and they'd buy it from you. Don't worry, they don't feel bad. He helped create this chaos. He would come in, buy it, worked with Wall Street to manipulate the stock market there. It's just these families are parasites that come in every avenue.
Yeah, and they're all connected to all these other guys, and it's like nobody's ever going to tell the truth. Not going to have the balls to tell the truth, and I guess it's kind of like Anthony C. Sutton said. Again, he said that, if you're an independent author and you're going to try to expose something, forget about getting a book deal from one of these big publishers, because they own all the publishing companies. So you can't expose these guys in any huge, in any big way, because like Henry Luce of Time Life,
Mm,
uh, and I know Time Life isn't. I don't even think that, well, Time Magazine's still around, but
right.
Time Life was huge when I was a little kid. And I think it
Yeah.
goes way back to like the 40s or 50s.
Right.
But
Yes, at
he
least.
was uh he was a Skull and Bones guy.
I didn't know he
Uh,
was too.
he was also a Pilgrim Society guy and a CFR guy, so he was in several of those big groups. Uh, this guy William F. Buckley, he was a Skull and Bones guy, and he was supposed to be like, he was the guy that founded National Review, which I guess was, at one
Oh,
point it was a huge conservative magazine. But
right.
from what I understand, like, he was kind of the guy that pushed conservatism to be more like this lukewarm kind of, meaningless thing that it is today. Because
Interesting. Like
he was for a, he was kind of for a lot of things that were more liberal. Like, he talked a good game, but when it came down
okay.
to it, yeah, he was like pretty liberal for a Republican.
Well, it's so important if you control that. Like we have seen, I remember I learned so little in school because I didn't apply myself, but the guy said, like my teacher, I think it was Mr. Martin, he said it, the paradigm, like the left right paradigm of values, it always keeps going a little bit to the left. And I can't, looking back, I don't know what he was, a Republican or a Democrat, but he's, that's why it's so important to have these, like you said, these lukewarm people that will slowly, like that you give them in it, like, hey, come on, maybe we should,
Mhm,
allow, whatever. I don't want to say anything that's going to get me kicked off of YouTube, but events that conservatives have given up, and now they fight, for non-traditional values and things. It's mind-blowing, but it's so helpful if you have the guy running the propaganda as a part of this global group.
oh, yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's sad what it's become, and I think I've mentioned it to you on this show before, but, like, it's been a little over 20 years, like 22 years or something like that since I started looking into politics, and I really got kind of into it, and, the conservative movement has changed so much just in those 22 years. It's like it's barely recognizable.
No, and that's what the skull, that Hegel philosophy again. You have a th- that was I was trying looking for what he used, and it was thesis, antithesis, synthesis, and that's all. They just keep smacking that thesis and antithesis together, and we keep getting the synthesis that they want, and it just keeps going more and more global. Which I think would that be your guess is one of the main things that these, you call them, you did those Fabian socialist episodes. Sutton calls them corporate socialists. You think that's, besides all the other evil stuff, that's the main goal, is that global government?
It seems like it, as crazy as it sounds, because you think that a lot of those people would be afraid that they would kind of get lost in the mix, but I
Mm,
guess they know that they would have a good place in this new system. And I think it goes even beyond just greed and just corporatism and different things like that. I think it's also like almost like a spiritual push, to have this world government, because it seems like that a lot of this new age kind of stuff is pushing. Well, I know it's pushing towards it, with
right.
Theosophy and Annie Besant and Blavatsky and Alice Bailey and all that. So yeah, it's more than just, you're getting it with the big corporations and banking houses, but you're also getting it with this new age push too. And I think in the late 1800s, early 1900s, a lot of the progressives, a lot of them well-to-do, were into a lot of this theosophy and this new age kind of stuff. So and I don't want to get all Christiany on you, but like
I love it. Get all Christiany.
I mean, the scripture kind of points to a world government. So yeah, I think that's what's in store. I mean, the World Economic Forum, and I mean, if you start looking at all the global like the global NGOs and different organizations that are pushing that, it gets to be just overwhelming.
Yeah. Well, I started working on Father Seraphim Rose, whatever anyone thinks about Jay Dyer, he talks about that book all the time. And I think it's called Orthodoxy, the Religion of the Future. You haven't read it, right?
I have read it. Yeah, I
Oh, you
did
have read
actually.
it? Oh
Yeah,
my
yeah.
God. That's awesome. But in there, and I only have, like, I've fallen away from reading it, but he talks about how, kind of like what we were just talking about with the conservative movement, giving inches, and which then you take huge strides. And before you know it, you're a totally different, your beliefs don't even match what they did 20 years ago. Well, that's exactly what they're doing with, like, religion. He
Hmm.
in Orthodoxy, and I don't know what I'm a Christian, but he talks about how these, like, Catholic Church and all these, Christian organizations, the Protestant sects, they meet with, imam or a rabbi, and all these people, to these peace conferences to understand each other. We all worship the same God. That's their, like, slogan to connect. But each time that you do that and you give a not the consolation, but like you give them an inch, I don't know what word I'm looking for, you are now not worshiping the same religion. So it's a similar thing with, like new age Christian churches, or like woke Christian churches. Like,
Hmm.
this isn't Christianity. I don't know what you're worshiping. You, like, have Christian themes, but
Yeah.
this isn't a Christian church. Just like the conservative movement, this isn't, what's conservative about X, Y, and Z. I don't need to say it. Everyone knows what we do in the conservative movement. Like that thing I sent you, base politics, but he's has a rainbow flag and it's that's not base politics, nor is it conservative. What do you like? What are you
Right.
talking about?
Yeah, and it kinda goes back to, kinda like, the Fabian stuff I looked into because, they talk about infiltrating, Fabian permeation. It makes me wonder how much infiltration has happened by people on from the other side into the conservative movement, to kinda push it towards the left.
Hmm.
I don't know, maybe that's not the case, but it's certainly moved to the left, like you said, and, it just keeps moving more and more to the left. And if you ask the average person, they would be like, "Are you crazy? The 2 parties are more apart than they've ever been." Just because it on the outside, it might seem that way with especially under the Trump years and then the
Yeah.
first part of, Biden's administration, but it's not that way. It really is not.
No, name like a people, these differences are so many, back the blue, don't back the blue unless they're arresting January 6th insurrectionists or
Right.
whatever. I mean, no, they're the real homophobes. They're the real racists. They're the real, and it's just like they're exactly the same. You guys just fight about points, but you both, you know, like I don't know if it's but like I would end immigration. The conservatives just say, no, we can't stop immigration. We just need to build a wall. No, it should no one is elite. Like they're just so similar. It's just like a simple point that they flip against.
Yeah, it's like they don't really stand for anything, and but they'll say just enough to keep us kind of or keep the base kind of hanging on to them and supporting them.
Mhm.
And of course, as long as you make the opposition seem bad, then people are going to stick with you.
Right.
And so they really don't have to try that hard. Uh, Either side, for that matter.
Right. Yeah.
Uh, but
They
yeah, and of
don't.
course, people, and don't get me wrong. I mean, I'm certainly more to the right than I am the left because the left, have just they're insane.
Right. Right.
They just don't even make sense anymore. Like they would, uh, you know, give up everything just to beat to the Republicans, like their own freedom, in fact. So it's insane. But
But I guess that's the goal, right? I mean, that's they did it. They have
yeah,
tied I made this, and I don't know if I'm not a philosopher, but I've made this like in my head, it was a big realization. Like these false flags and things, they started with, dividing the country. And then they started with like other false flags, serial killers, murders, all these cults. They divided like your community and then, terrorists. And then now they've got your family. And it's insane. Like these people will dislike their own family member because they listen to Tucker Carlson while they listen to Rachel Maddow. Like what, dude, you guys both of them have been in court. Both of them had to say to cover their ass that this show is not a news show. It's an entertainment show, whatever, like the same distinction that Alex Jones has had to make in court, that this isn't news, it's entertainment. Like these are the people you're standing with. Like look around, dude. Look around. Would you want this person to defend you in any way?
it's so sad, man, that we've really been divided to the point where it's hard to imagine getting divided much more. I'm sure that they'll find a way,
Oh yeah, they'll
just when
find a
you
way.
think you've seen it all, then they come up with like more more genders to fight over and now like you said we're so divided because of the COVID thing and the that goes right into left right politics and stuff like that. So I kind of do feel like I haven't put much thought into it, but if they did by chance put Trump back in or if he was president again, I think that would finish us off, because
Mm.
I think
Well,
that would be enough to totally divide everyone to the point of, you know,
no return.
yeah,
Well, that was the one. So, we talk about our friend John, and if anybody go listen to We've Read the Documents, John's so super knowledgeable about things that I don't know enough about, but he talks a lot about the CNP, which is the Council for National Policy. And that's like, in his theory, that is the right side of the CFR. So the CFR obviously a left leaning organization, even though people like Alan Dulles, who are Mr. Anti Communism, was president of the CFR. But he claims that this great awakening and all this stuff is moves of the right to put Trump back into power. And that's how they're going to, that these two sides are fighting. Is that pretty much right what he says? I don't want to
I
put,
think so.
but
Yeah, I think so.
my point of was that oh my god, dude, I don't know my point. I don't know what I was going for. The CMP, I don't
Putting
know, dude. I have
oh,
no
well,
idea.
putting Trump oh, well, I was saying that,
Oh yes, okay, yeah,
I think that would finish us off as far as, the division. Although, another I don't think Joe Biden would make another 4-year term, but, like,
no, oh my
you
god,
know, whoever I think whoever is gonna be president, because whoever it is, they're gonna keep us divided because that's their job, basically.
right,
But I
right.
think that, the way that people hated Trump so badly, I think that that would just totally drive, the Democrats over the edge. But then at the same time, people like us who are really trying to get to the bottom of things would have to deal with, Trump
Ugh,
worship syndrome for 4 more years. And, the thing is, it's like, okay, he was right about a few things, but they just totally gave him leeway to do anything he wanted, and he could do no wrong whatsoever, and that's very dangerous, and especially at the point we are now.
yeah.
And
Well, that
so,
I the also what just came out today was that the January, the bloody insurrection that just was worse than Pearl Harbor and 9/11. They really Nick Fuentes and another guy. So Nick, I don't listen to him, but he's articulate. Obviously, he's charismatic. But they took $500,000 of Bitcoin from him. He got it from a guy, this French guy, who gave it to like a lot of the quote unquote alt right sides of like podcasting or whatever you want to call it. Nick obviously is one of those people, and he got $500,000 worth of Bitcoin. Well, the feds came in and took all of that, and now they're investigating this guy who's dead, I think, and who else he gave money to. And I just find it like it's just so insane that I can't tell who's like a plant, who's real. And but this January 6th is just being used again for as another tactic to continue pounding fights and nonsense because it's so you can't argue against it. It's either you think it was a bloody insurrection or you don't. There is
mhm.
no in the middle.
Yeah, that's true, man, and it's ridiculous on its face. I mean, to compare that with Pearl Harbor or 9/11, I mean, it's asinine. You should be laughed at, out of the building or whatever, but people want to believe it. They want to believe that, and at this point, people will believe whatever they want. They
Yeah.
kind of make up their mind about things immediately, even without knowing any of the details, and it's pitiful. I don't know what to say about it. I mean, how much stupider can we get?
I wanted to ask you this. So everyone on the left, their big fear or that they'll talk about is Trump, like, or like the theory is maybe that of many people or regular people that like they'll I often hear comparisons to Weimar Germany. I've made those comparisons now, and that Trump or somebody is going to come in as a fascist dictator, like Mustache Man, and that's like what maybe regular people make this claim, or that's what they're setting up. But I don't see like that. What's your take on because they call Trump the fascist or he's like Hitler, and so he runs again. And do you think that that's the viewpoint most? I'm trying to think of the question I'm trying to ask. I don't know what I'm trying to like say. Do you understand like that? That's what they always compared this to, that he's going to come in like this dictator, and maybe they're setting that up for him to be that savior for the right in 2024. Or do you think he has like a chance of actually running and coming back to win? Uh,
That's a good question. I honestly almost can't see him coming back. I don't know why he would want to,
yeah,
because he's got his own businesses, and I'm sure that was much easier being able to do whatever the hell you want and have your kids run your business than having to, he was down, he was like downsizing, or that's not the term, at the White House. That was not
yeah,
nearly as what he was used to.
right.
But if he's some kind of insider that is meant to play that role to come back and do that, then it's possible. But um, I feel like he played his part,
Mhm.
and I feel like he's done. I really do.
Yeah.
But I feel like there'll be rumblings about him coming back, and he might even run. But I just don't feel like he'll be the president again.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that we're still waiting, like, the next step in this is, like, Revelations, that Antichrist figure, and I feel like we're I don't know how much closer you like, it's, somewhere here, if you believe in the Bible, where these top people, they clearly believe in the opposite, so, they're trying to create, for sure, this Antichrist, who this leader who is going to smooth over all of these problems. Maybe that's what we have, another 4-year election. Maybe that's why they put Trump back in, to create even more problems. So they, if that's his next role, so they can really bring in this guy that everyone will just want to heal the nation. I know we don't talk
Yeah,
antichrist much, but what do you think about that kind of theory?
no, no, that you could be right. I've been thinking about that myself, and you know, what will happen? Like, how much worse are things going to get before this Antichrist, if he does show himself? Uh, how much worse will things have to get before people will be like, "Oh, please save us," and fall for
Right.
this, this charismatic guy? Because the Bible says that everyone will like him. So, meaning the
Yeah,
majority of people, and that couldn't be Trump because half the people didn't like
that's
him,
a good point.
half the people hated him. So, and you always hear that Obama was supposed to be the Antichrist. Uh, so conservatives always say that stuff, but
I
I don't think they
know.
really think enough about
No.
it because he's going to come from Europe. He's going to be liked by most of the people in the world. So yeah, that's going to be an interesting. It's interesting times, man.
Right. Well, that's a few steps, because it really, I mean, I can't, the world, and I don't think it's just America. I mean, Europe is divided. They have migrants coming, or refugees, whatever the correct, and, half the country, crime is going up in these areas, these rapes, there's these grooming gangs in Britain, and people are angry. And then you have the other half that are the total opposite, that say, "Oh, please come, the more the merrier." It's
Yeah,
it's not just America, the whole world's divided. They've done
yeah,
so good, or so well, in creating this, either right, or like this side or this side. There is no middle ground.
yeah. And it seems like the only thing that they could be going for is to have some kind of world government to take, "Oh, this will fix it if we were all together,
Mm,
and we all like." I was reading in the UNESCO book that was Julian Huxley, and he was like Aldous Huxley's brother, and they were both eugenicists and Fabians and all that. But UNESCO is like a big part of the UN. It's like entertainment, education, and arts, I think, is what they're over.
mm.
But he has this term in that book. He's talking about world government, and that's what we need to have, and all this stuff. But he called it universal. Oh crap! Universal culture, I think is what he called it. He was explaining that we'll all have the same culture, and if we all have the same culture, then we'll all
How
be able to get
exciting.
along.
Oh, I
And
can't
it's like,
wait.
how dull does that sound? The more they talk about diversity, I think the more they actually
Remove
mean
it.
we might look different, but they want us to act the same, listen to the same music, watch the same shows, behave the same way.
Yeah. No, I think that was a great, yeah, the more they push the more it gets stolen from any diversity that we had.
Mhm.
It's just it's insane, dude, and it just can that and I used to struggle with that, like Dulles, he created, and Henry Luce, and all of these people that were power players, these ardent anti-communists. They started wars, they killed millions to stop communism, and now these same uh, corporations and NGOs, they now seemingly poke or promote all this woke culture. And for the longest time, I couldn't understand that. And I still think that I'm starting to think that theory is that it wasn't about fighting like communism. It was, to group these people together. And now they're pushing this woke stuff, not because they were always corporate socialists, but now they know that if you divide these people into groups, they can't organize. You'll, if you steal, make everyone's diversity the same diversity, there will be no middle class. There'll be no one to fight back against the further and further, they're removing our freedoms.
Yeah, yeah, I think you're right. I mean, that's the only thing that makes sense. And You can kind of see that in the things that they've done and the things that they've pushed.
Yeah. No, and last question I want to ask you is, so Russia and Ukraine, dude, what is, I know I don't know much. I just know that it's getting like very close to a weird boiling point, but I don't know if it's enough. I would be shocked to see like the war that we think wars of World War II and stuff. But what do you think is happening there, and what do you think is going to happen next?
Man, I do not know. I should have followed that closer, but I feel like, I've read a little bit about how, the United States keeps putting their ships closer and closer to, the Russian territory and stuff like that. So I think it's pretty obvious that if, what we see is legit or what we hear, it almost seems like the military industrial complex wants to, maybe they don't want full on war with Russia, but they want to agitate them.
Yeah.
And is that real? Or are they just doing it to scare us? And in order to, hey, we need to spend these several billion on these weapons because we might go to war with Russia.
Right.
I
Right.
don't know. It's hard to tell, man. It really is.
Well,
It's
yeah.
something I need to follow closer.
Well, that's what's so difficult is we can't tell, like I don't know if it's my like propaganda that I consume. You hear all these things that make Russia sound like they're the good guy, like Putin is fighting Globo, Omo, you know the word, and
Yeah,
globalism, and he's just trying to keep traditional values and stuff. So you on our conservative on the right, we have sympathies towards that. We want that. We want somebody who will say no, that's propaganda, woke stuff. But you just like how we talked about how Harriman funded the Soviet Union. I can't see that. Oh, so they let this guy Putin come into power, and he's what he said no to the international bankers. He said no, I don't want your billions of dollars. I just can't see that. I think you're right. Like the building up, like oh maybe some fake skirmishes here, but they don't need a huge war to justify continuing spending trillions of dollars on weapons.
that's true. That is true. And I don't know what to think about Putin either. It's like maybe he's seen what happened to Russia and how you know we basically pushed them to the brink of they were broke and everything fell there, their industries and stuff like
Yeah.
that. It could be maybe possibly that he doesn't want the bankers in there because he knows that they will just buy out the country and totally own
Right.
it.
Right.
I doubt it. That seems like, are there really people like that would push away that much funding? But you
I
never know.
know. We can
You never
only
know.
hope. I hope
Yeah,
that he did. I would have a Russian flag hanging up if that's what I thought he did. But it's
right.
just I'm so jaded. I can't believe anything, nor can I trust anything. It's just
Yeah, and one thing quickly, I'll say this quickly
yeah.
is like with Putin, he's like hated by the left now so badly. But it's so funny because we just go back to under Obama and you can see Hillary who met with Putin and they were all chummy and there's some really funny pictures of the two of them together, but like the whole uranium one deal and all that. So they did not hate Putin until he supposedly got along with Trump. So, that's total, that whole thing is just
Oh,
manufactured.
dude. Well, thanks for coming. I could talk to you for forever, I mean, but where can everyone find you? And I'll put all your links, but plug your stuff.
Thanks, man. It's been great as always. Thank you for having me.
Oh,
People can find the show at theoddmanout.podbean.com. And the show's on most podcatchers. And also, you can find me on underscore the odd man out on Twitter and Instagram.
nice, dude. And are you back on Spotify yet or no?
No, I'm not. Like this one Fringe Radio Network, that guy posts my shows on his Spotify
Oh, that's
sometimes.
nice. Okay.
He just posts like all kinds of different shows on there. So
Oh,
you
that's
can
good.
find some of my shows on there.
Yeah. So any Spotify listeners, but I feel like most people are used to download. I have multiple podcasting apps. But anyway, Odd
Yeah.
Man, thanks for being on the show as always, dude. I love you. As everyone knows, I love the Odd Man. We talk all the time. So thanks for coming on, dude. And we'll talk again soon, I'm sure.
Awesome, man. Thank you.
All
Have a
right,
good
dude.
night.
Take care, buddy. Bye.